morning. Thank you so much for joining this week's ScotWeek podcast. I'm joined today with a very special guest. We have Aimee Anderson. Hi, Aimee.
Hi there, Kelsey. How are you doing?
I'm very well. How are you doing?
Yeah, very good. Very good from a very hot London.
Yeah, before we started recording, Aimee was telling me, how hot is it there?
It is about 34 degrees Celsius, so that's like about 93 Fahrenheit. So it's hot.
Oh my goodness, right. So Aimee, I was introduced to you through Russell Dalgleish. He was he's the chairman of the Scottish Business Network. And I was so delighted to get your email. So tell our audience actually, what do you do, Aimee?
I guess the easiest thing is to say that I work with big consumer brands, so kind of global brands, and help them get involved in the film world and the television space. So we get them to invest in film and television that can change the world. So any sort of big commercial film and television productions that have a social impact message, so it might be movies, like an Erin Brockovich or a Philadelphia, something that kind of changes the way we think about things and ultimately changes behaviors.
That's amazing. And so you have an amazing accent because it showcases all the different places and experiences that you've had in life, and I love it. So let's start with that. So you're born in Scotland, and where in Scotland, and what was that like growing up?
So I grew up in a little place called Perth. It's Perthshire, so it's right in the middle of Scotland, basically. And it's kind of, I would say Perth, very sort of middle-aged, middle class, very sort of family, but very, very small. Like it's a small town, and I had a great childhood growing up. I mean, I didn't come from any money or anything like that. My dad was a local lawyer, so he had a good job, but he certainly wasn't earning the mega bucks of lawyers in Edinburgh, Glasgow, or, kind of certainly London or, kind of these big cities. So he was like a local lawyer. My mum was a nurse, and, it was a really lovely sort of family place to grow up. But I just went to the local schools. So again, I didn't go to any sort of private paid for schools. So, I think growing up in that sort of environment, you don't necessarily have anybody, all my friends' parents were like, kind of policemen, doctors, nurses. There was nobody that was like the editor of Harper's Bazaar. There was nobody that was kind of like, you were limited in terms of what you thought life was beyond Perth. But all I knew as kind of a young girl was that I wanted to get out of Perth. And frankly, I hate to say it, but I wanted to get out of Scotland. I wanted to kind of, go and explore. And I just had this feeling as a kid that I wanted to do big things. And, my dream was always to travel and actually go over to the States. Like, kind of my big dream was to go to New York and make it big in New York, like that, that little girl's dream, basically. So, it was great, but it was, I just wanted to leave.
Yeah. And did you make it over to New York eventually to visit?
I did. So I kind of ended up leaving Perth and going to Glasgow to study. I studied media and communications in Glasgow, but just a kind of small university, a new university called Glasgow Caledonian. And, my big dream was just to, I couldn't get away fast enough. I was looking for jobs in New York because for me, I saw New York as the epicenter of the business world. And even though I always wanted to get into film and television, I was confused as a kid because you don't know, like that film's actually LA, or, I forgot about that fact. I was like, well, I want to do film, but I want to do business. And it was almost like business sort of overrode the film side. And so for me, business was New York. So I took myself off to New York at age 19. And got some jobs over there, and then of course realized film wasn't in New York. And while I got some really great opportunities over there, actually what I really wanted to do was film. And funnily enough, I was in a queue for a nightclub and bumped into a girl from London, and she was trying to get into music. And she was asking me what I was doing in New York, and I'd said, oh, I'm trying to break into film. And she was a bit confused because she was like, well, isn't film in LA? And because I'm trying to break into music, and music's in New York. And then that was just this moment of, oh my God, that explains why this is so hard. Why am I in New York? I should be in LA. And yeah, that was kind of that moment of, I need to regroup and think. But I had a big decision to make, because I did fall in love with New York as a city, the energy and all that kind of stuff. And my boss at the time, knew that my visa was coming up and it needed renewed. And he said, look, I'll sponsor your visa, which of course I was really excited about, and was like, yeah, great. And then he said, no, it comes with conditions. And, either you work for me for the next 2 years, and you agree to stay with me. And, we had an amazing relationship. He taught me so much. He was an incredible mentor in business. And, but then it wasn't PR, it wasn't the exact job that I wanted. And it certainly wasn't in film. And he said, he could see me in turmoil, thinking, oh God, what do I do? I need to stay in New York, and that means committing to this. And he was great because he knew me so well at that point. And he said, look, the way I see it is, you've got two choices here. I'm offering you New York, and you could decide whether you want New York or your career. And of course, he knew what he was doing when he said that, because I was such a career girl and so focused on the job that helped me realize that, that was what was clouding my judgment, the fact that I wanted to stay in New York, and that wasn't the career choice. So that's when I made the decision to come back home to Scotland and regroup again and figure out what my next move was. So, yeah.
Wow, I absolutely love that. And it's interesting, the more I talk to powerhouse women like you that are in business and have a very clear vision of who they are and what they want and where they're going, it's when they listen to their intuition and those people, those signs that show up, that's what gets them on the right path. And I love that, because there's two very clear instances where you knew, oh wait, this is where I need to go.
Yeah, I think back then I wasn't so aware of intuition. I am very much now, kind of totally got that space where it's like listening to your gut feeling and your inner voice, and, and I do all that meditation and all that great stuff about giving me clarity, because there's so much going on that you need to have that space to get rid of all the clutter and all the noise around you. But at that time, I think, a lot of the time I felt that there were doors closing, and it was really frustrating. I was trying to beat down these doors, and eventually you had a moment of, this isn't working. And when you're 19, 20 and you're so ambitious, like so ambitious it hurts. I just had this big dream, and I was somebody that kind of, because I had that energy at that age, and I was used to, when I was in Glasgow, I did seem to meet the right people, and I seemed to have people helping me or wanting to open doors for me. And so when I got to New York, I really did think I could make it. I really thought that I could, I had something that differentiated me. I was Scottish, so immediately, and and that's something that's great, kind of the Scots and the Americans, have this big love fest, and which is lovely. And so people be like, oh, you're from Scotland, great, we want you, so I kind of felt like I had that edge, but I just could not make it work for whatever reason. And obviously that was part of my journey. And I kind of, now that I'm older and I look back over my life, everything kind of starts to make sense. You're like, that was interesting, that was big learning that you then take forward. And at that age also, trying to get sponsored for a visa was like ridiculous. At the end of the day, I had ambition, and I had drive and energy, and I had a natural talent and a natural skill set, but I wasn't qualified. I didn't have any experience. I didn't have, it was almost like I was trying to do something way ahead of where I actually was. And, actually before I went to New York, one of my mentors in Glasgow had said to me, he thought I was making a big mistake going over to America. And I couldn't believe he said that to me, because he was really successful, self-made millionaire, worked in the music space. And I remember just being like, out of all the people, I can't believe you're telling me that you think this is a mistake for me to go and spread my wings and make it big in America. And he was like, yeah, but you're a tadpole and you're going over to like a massive, massive ocean, and much better to grow into a whale over here and then move over to the States and make it big when you've got something backing you up. And at the time I didn't really realize what he meant. But of course, when I ended up having to come back again and kind of eat humble pie because it hadn't worked out quite the way I thought it would, I started to realize, and certainly as I started to move up the ladder in the UK, I did start to realize that was just it was never going to happen. I was never going to have somebody sponsor my visa at that age with so little experience, that I was not going to be bringing any added value to a company at that time, because I was young, I didn't have the experience that, you have all the energy and ambition you want and the raw talents, but you're still, you just don't have the experience, and it all boils down to that at the end of the day. So he was right. And I had to accept that.
Wow. Oh my goodness. There's like 10 questions that popped up in my head. But so I wanted to just backtrack a little bit. So what inspired your love of film?
My love of film, just, I guess, growing up, it's something I just absolutely loved. Movies like, The Wizard of Oz, that was a big one that I absolutely loved as a kid. The Sound of Music, all these musicals, all these kind of magical stories. And then, of course, I had a brother, so I grew up with like the Terminator franchise, Indiana Jones franchise, Jaws, so it was all kind of like different kinds of genres of film, everything from musical to kind of like action, and everything in between. And, I just love storytelling. And I guess like my natural skill is communications. That's kind of what I studied. That's kind of the thing that's, I guess, makes me tick, is PR. And actually PR is storytelling. So, kind of it does make sense in a way that was, I was just always drawn to the stories and the lessons. I loved a moral. I loved, which is interesting that that's kind of what I've gone into now. It's weird talking about this. It does suddenly make sense when you're looking back at your life, because you don't normally do that. We don't normally have these conversations of how did you get where you are and what happened, and the junctions you came to. And looking back at me as a kid, I love those stories of transformation. I love those stories of somebody growing or learning. And one of my actually my favorite films that I watched as an adult is American History X, which obviously tackles a huge subject, and I think kind of really has an impact in terms of kind of getting people to stop and think about such a major issue. So that was something that I kind of as a kid, like, these were the sorts of stories that I was drawn to anyway. So it was just part of my DNA growing up. And even as a sort of 10-year-old, 11-year-old, I wanted to work in film. I kind of knew that. I knew I didn't want to be a filmmaker, so it wasn't like I was going around with a camera like a lot of film directors. I was drawn to business. I wanted to be in charge, and I wanted to make decisions, and I wanted to, kind of at that point, I thought maybe getting into entertainment law. And my dad was a lawyer, so this is what I mean about when you grow up in like a place like Perth. I didn't know all the jobs that were available to me. I didn't even know you could be a film director. I didn't know about, any of these things. And so because my dad was a lawyer and he was in business, that's kind of what made me think, right, I'll be an entertainment lawyer. And it was my dad that was sort of saying, oh, I don't know if that's really what you would want to do. Like, a contract's a contract. It doesn't matter if it's for Disney or it's for a gas company. It's a contract. And he said, I just think you would be bored. So I needed to kind of think, well, what would I do in film? And it was kind of later down the line that I got into communications, obviously. And that's when I was like, right, PR, that's what I'll do.
That's brilliant. I love what you mentioned about stories about transformation, because all of the great films and stories I can think of, there's a transformation. There's, you know, your lead hero person goes through the challenges, and at the end of the day, there's an ending, whether it's positive or negative. It's like screenwriting 101. And thinking about Scotland, you know, it's interesting because we were talking about earlier about America's love affair with Scotland, because so many of America's founders were from Scotland. And, you know, Adam Smith and all these amazing Scottish Enlightenment people that really impacted how America developed. So Americans, I mean, there's 150 Highland Games across the US, and, you know, Outlander is just huge here. Absolutely.
I absolutely adore Outlander. Absolutely adore it. It's amazing. Love it. I was hooked.
How can you not? I mean, my gosh, it's amazing. But it's interesting because, you know, the Scottish government is a supporter of ScotWeek, and a lot of our friends and board members from Scotland, there's this tug and pull of, yes, we want to honor and celebrate Scottish history and traditions and bagpipes and men in kilts. But at the same time, you know, the new slogan for the Scottish government is #Scotland is now. And all they're, you know, talking about PR and communications, it's all about, okay, what's next for Scotland? There's all this amazing biotech sustainability. I mean, they're coming up with a vaccine for COVID in Edinburgh, and it's just amazing. So there's this huge transformation going on. And then you were talking about the film, sorry, I'm rambling, but American History X, was a really paramount film. At least when I watched it, when it first came out, I was stunned. I was bawling on the floor crying, because I was like, oh my gosh. Yeah. Do you think that there's a film like that for Scotland that needs to happen? And it doesn't need to be about politics at all, but is there something that you feel like would be a really cool story to tell, to showcase Scotland, we need to wake up?
I don't know. I think always, for me, a story's all about characters and understanding characters and looking at stories that haven't been told before. So I think it's all about, you know, for me, again, Scotland, I think, has got a rich history, and it's really diverse. And I think it's focusing on the diversity and stories that, for me, wouldn't typically be told. So kind of I want to look at, you know, kind of more the multicultural stuff, you know, rather than it being just a solid Scot story, because actually there have been great Scot stories and they've been told, but it's looking beyond that, I think, and, you know, maybe sort of more, rather than it being the ancient Scotland, and maybe to this point about Scotland is now, like what's happening now, and looking at the next generation of Scots who, you know, kind of aren't maybe like from the Viking heritage or anything like that. It's much more international, multicultural, and maybe doesn't look like, you know, kind of your red-haired, you know, white freckle person. You know, it's kind of like much more diverse. So I think it's like exploring, you know, those stories and modern day stories rather than this historic Scotland, because I think while our history is rich and it's amazing and some crazy things happened back then, and obviously Outlanders, you know, kind of based like loosely around, you know, kind of historic events. And it's amazing to go back there and be like, wow, that was our history. Much better to be forward looking and thinking about, well, what's going on now, because Scotland's so much more than our past. It's what's happening now, and it's looking towards the future. So I think it's looking at those stories, and for me personally, I love, like I said, this transformation. So somebody coming from one background and changing their life, or having this big realization, and, you know, bringing people with them as well. It's not just somebody who, you know, if you look at the Erin Brockovich story, you know, it changed her life, but it changed all those people's lives. She was helping people. And I think that's kind of what's really inspiring, is to have somebody that kind of has an idea, but then it changes, or they stick up for something that's right, you know, where there's injustices going on, and they then do something really brave that kind of needs to be celebrated and told, because that inspires the audiences. That's the great thing about film. You've got a captive audience for, you know, between sort of like usually around an hour and a half, and they're captured and they're with you on that story, and it allows them to walk in someone else's shoes for the duration of that movie. And that's really powerful, because how often do we get to see somebody else's choices, decisions, situation, and I think that's where film can really, really be powerful at that and change people's perceptions.
Absolutely, absolutely. And leading into that, I love your story about how you and your two partners started Better World Entertainment. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so basically I'd set up AAA, which is Access All Areas. That's where we get brands to invest in film and TV, like I was saying. But really, I kind of felt like we needed to have, in that scenario, we're an agency that sits between the brands and the filmmakers. So we're kind of like, managing that relationship. And really, I started to realize that the two industries are so different, and we're trying to kind of control both sides to make it all smooth. And that was getting more and more challenging. And so it made sense for us to actually set up our own production company and finance company, where we could then come in with finance to support those filmmakers over and above the brands. And so I was very lucky that during my journey of setting up my business, I met two incredible women, Lisa Wolofsky, who is based in Canada, and Tatiana Kelly, who is based in LA. So Lisa's background is working for one of the big Canadian banks, and she was doing that for about 25 years, and she has just got so much experience when it comes to film finance, and is just a really, really, kind of leading innovator in the space. She not only did debt finance for the bank, which you'd expect, but she also set up an equity division, which is kind of unheard of for a bank. So she was really pioneering, and I love pioneers, game changers, people breaking the mold and changing the way things are done to do things differently. So so Lisa, I met Lisa through Tatiana. Tatiana was supporting me with AAA. She's a producer that's represented by CAA, incredible independent producer with massive track records. And so the two, we were speaking, and I was talking about, this would be great if we had kind of a finance company. And Lisa and the two of them were like, we're in. We want to get involved in this. We love what you're doing. This is something we want to be part of. So the great thing about the three of us is that we've got such complementary but very different skill sets. So Lisa's obviously, just huge in film finance. Tatiana's amazing in the production space, and then I come in with the marketing piece. So between the three of us, we've got kind of covered the main areas, and obviously we've got kind of incredible people around us that are working with us too. So it's a really great team.
That's amazing. And we had a meeting first last week to talk more about what you're doing, but tell us more about what makes you unique. What is it that you saw in the past with the industry that wasn't working and that you wanted to do differently?
I came into film sort of in my late 20s. So I'd been working with brands for, kind of sort of the age of 20, and been moving my way up in brand marketing. But my passion was always film, and it was just so difficult to break into the film industry. And eventually I managed it. I'd been doing a big partnership with Hewlett Packard and the British Film Institute, and the BFI kind of said, look, we'll introduce you to DDA, so Dennis Davidson Associates, so one of the kind of preeminent PR agencies in film and TV. So I ended up having a conversation with Lawrence Atkinson, who's now one of the owners, and basically I was given a job that I really should never have got. Is the long and the short of it. Basically, I'd had all this brand experience, but zero film experience really, other than working with Disney on sort of a consumer products level, and the BFI with HP. And but Lawrence saw my passion, my hunger to get into film, and so he was like, right, well, actually, there's a position that we could create for you, where you're working more closely with Dennis, you're working more in the corporate space. We kind of could do with sort of having a proper corporate division. And so I got in, and he said, I've been working with Gillette and just came off working with Thierry Henry and Tiger Woods and Roger Federer. And he was like, look, if you can sell razors, you can sell Tom Cruise. So let's give this a shot. So he took a big chance, and I think he would say it did pay off. And yeah, I came in and set up that division. But as soon as I got there, I was kind of like, this makes no sense to me. Like, I don't understand this, this marketing is all back to front. And, what it just baffled me. And I thought, well, maybe it's just because I'm new to this, it's a different industry, and I'll learn as I go along and it'll all make sense eventually. Well, kind of 15 plus years on, I'm still, no, this makes no sense. And the only way I can explain it is it's a bit like the film industry puts marketing sort of secondary, particularly in the independent film space, because it's all about making the film and getting the film made. And nobody's really giving any second thoughts to marketing. And so that budget's an afterthought. Usually the budget's nowhere near big enough. And and as a result, the film doesn't find its audience. It's very hard to find an audience at the 11th hour. And that never made sense. And if a brand was to do the same, if a consumer brand was to do the same, just think of it like this. So you've got Nike. If Nike did what the film industry do, Nike would bring out an unbranded pair of trainers and then give it to JD Sports or give it to Amazon or give it to kind of one of the distributors and say to them, you brand it and you sell it. And I can assure you, Nike would never, ever, ever do that. They know exactly who they're selling that trainer to. They've already got the market before it's even got into production. And they have absolutely branded it. And there is a very, very strong marketing campaign behind that trainer. That's, in my experience of film, that wasn't really happening. The studios obviously have a big marketing machine. And if it's a big tentpole movie, it's very different. But when it comes to the independent film space, marketing is absolutely an afterthought. And that's something that we wanted to change. We wanted to have marketing being, we know who we're targeting, we know from the offset what we're doing, and also in terms of Better World, we want to have a strong consumer-facing brand because we want consumers to know, wow, it's a Better World film. I know what I'm going to get with that. And really, there's very few companies that work in film and television that consumers can identify with and say, I know what that kind of film will be because I know that brand. Most companies in the film and television space do not have a strong consumer brand. And that was something we wanted to change. So yeah, we're going into this with not just wanting to make commercially viable and smart movies that can change the world, that have a message, but also that are marketed properly from the get-go. And there's a plan to build not just like the independent films, kind of marketing, but also us as a company.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. And, being in LA and being a part of so many independent films, whether it's producing, directing, I'm primarily an actor, you see that and it gets frustrating because you do this amazing work. You have this great story that you want people to see. And the business side is just crap and nobody sees it. And it's just so disheartening sometimes. But I'm so excited for what you're doing. Now, we touched a little bit about this before. You talked about Aaron Brockovich in Philadelphia and multiculturalism and so many amazing things. Is there something for you personally that, something out there that you really are passionate about telling, whether it's human trafficking or human rights, or what is that?
I think, oh God, that's a good question. I've not really thought about something that's particularly something for me because I'm just, I just see a good story and I'm like, that needs to be told. But for me, I think my biggest bugbear is about injustice. I think that's a personal thing for me. I mean, obviously, we look at all movies, whether it's about mental health, whether it's about diversity, pioneers, people that have broken the mold. But for me, it's about things that, kind of are so unfair and that shouldn't be happening. So kind of human rights is probably a big thing for me. And just getting people to change the way they think about things where they're treating people so badly. So, kind of for me, it's just, wanting to make the world a little bit better. But the thing is, with all these social issues, they're all so important. I mean, whenever I hear things, I mean, I really loved I don't know if you know the movie I, Daniel Blake, which was a Ken Loach film in Cannes, and that was all kind of about the benefit system in the UK. So real indie film. But you know, I watched it, and it's just one of those things where you get so frustrated about, you know, kind of what's happening and how people can get stuck in the system. And so things like that, and just shining a light on what people have to deal with, that if you're not in that system and you don't understand it, you just don't know, you don't realize what's going on and how you can get lost and you know, just miss out for no fault of your own, and you're kind of caught in this situation where you don't fit into any bracket, and you're kind of screwed if you do, you're screwed if you don't. So it's, for me, it's kind of wanting to help people and wanting to shine a light on something that needs, you know, kind of, if everybody got together and helped change it, you know, kind of, that's where change happens. So it's really difficult for me to say one subject. It's really kind of about, yeah, getting people to think differently about things and getting people's stories out there and told.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I didn't mean to pigeonhole you, because I'm passionate about so many different topics too. And it boils down to, you said it beautifully, injustice. You see something and you see someone that is really championing that. I think that's so inspiring. So that's beautiful. I love that. So how can people support you? What are some of your needs? You know, if there's people in Los Angeles or anywhere in the world really, like, that says, yes, I love what you're doing, how do I help you?
So basically, we're sort of at the start of our journey with the film finance production company. So we've called ourselves Better World Entertainment, and we are looking for finance. So we are looking for kind of an investor, or, you know, kind of a few investors. But yeah, really it's kind of introductions down that road. If anybody's interested and wants to know more, then of course I can share details privately with them. But that would be mega helpful. And yeah, I guess that's the biggest thing at this moment in time, is getting the production and finance company up and running so that we can support the work we're doing with brands. And yeah, that's the exciting bit that we're at right now.
That's awesome. And how do people find you? Do they go to your website or what?
Yeah, so our website, so kind of the brand's agency is triple-a.agency. Mm-hmm. And with our Better World, we've not, obviously, because we've not got set up properly yet, so we don't have a website or anything until we're good to go. So yeah, it's just emailing me or calling me is probably the best way to get in touch and have a conversation.
Okay, fantastic. And we'll put links below in the text comments area. So I will put all of that down there. Maybe not your phone number, I'll put your email.
Great. Perfect.
Sounds good. Well, Aimee, is there anything else that you wish to share with us?
No, this is great. I'm loving what you guys are doing. I think this is amazing. And just, you know, I'm somebody that loves helping people as well and putting people in touch with people. And so always happy to meet new folk. And, you know, if we've got the same interests and want to help change the world, then that's all good. And it's, yeah, just great to have this opportunity.
Oh my goodness. Well, we are so delighted to have you on with us today, and we're so excited. So we have ScotWeek April 2021, and you said yes to coming and being a speaker on our film and television panel at ScotCon, and we're so excited.
I would love that. I cannot wait. That's going to be amazing.
Yes, absolutely. We're just nailing down our date with the venue. We're still hoping to do it at the Fairmont Miramar, but it'll be in April 2021, and it's going to be awesome. And I'm so excited.
Me too. Cannot wait.
Well, thank you, Aimee. You stay cool over in London. And
thank you very much. So great to chat.
Absolutely. All right.